He came to the Philippines to control everything: his schedule, his surroundings, even the people he would meet. A wealthy businessman from the West, he believed that money could solve loneliness, that efficiency could replace warmth, that precision could substitute heart. Yet, from the moment he stepped out of Manila airport, the city laughed at his plans. The heat clung to him like a stubborn shadow. The chaotic traffic seemed alive with its own will, and the laughter of children echoing from narrow alleyways reminded him painfully that happiness didn't always come in currency. He checked into a hotel, expecting silence, expecting order, expecting the kind of control he thrived on back home. Instead, he found the hum of life: sari-sari stores spilling color onto dusty streets, tricycles rattling past with urgent purpose, neighbors greeting each other as if the world had no clocks to obey. And deep inside, something began to stir, a discomfort he couldn't pay away, a question he hadn't prepared for. Am I the rich one, or am I the empty one? If you believe that kindness is the only true language, subscribe to Island Revelations as we explore stories that change the heart. Today, you will witness a man who arrived with arrogance but left with wonder, who thought he was teaching life, only to learn how to live. He arrived in Manila with the air of a man who had already measured the world and found it wanting. Everything about him, the crisp suit, the designer bag, the polished shoes, screamed success. Yet, as he stepped out of the airport, the city seemed to mock his careful calculations. The heat hit him first, thick and humid, sticking to his skin like an uninvited thought. He frowned at the tricycles darting past in a chaotic ballet, their horns a language he could not understand. Piles of street food vendors, children chasing each other barefoot, and the smell of fried fish mixed with a faint scent of gasoline assaulted him. He wanted order. He wanted silence. He wanted the world to bend to his expectations, but by the time he reached his hotel, frustration had already crept in. The elevator was slow. The receptionist smiled too much. The corridor carpets had wrinkles, a detail no one at home would ever tolerate. He called his assistant, demanding updates, precise schedules, and immediate answers to problems he had not yet faced. But outside his window, the city pulsed with life, stubbornly untamed and resistant to his commands. He poured himself a glass of water, but even that felt insufficient. Cold but tasteless, unable to wash away the tension curling in his chest, for the first time in years, money had failed him, and it frightened him more than he cared to admit. The next morning, he ventured out, seeking the efficiency of a guided tour, expecting neat streets and polite queues. What he found instead were narrow alleys, neighbors shouting greetings across fences, vendors haggling loudly with cheerful persistence. A small boy ran past, carrying a basket of mangoes too large for his tiny arms, and collided with him. The businessman barely stepped aside in time, and the boy tumbled, scraping his knee. He felt irritation flare, hot and sharp, the old instinct to blame, to judge, to move on without consequence. But before he could utter a word, a woman, mid-40s, worn hands, a sari-sari store apron dusted with flour, rushed over. She lifted the boy gently, murmuring comfort in a language he did not understand. She pressed a damp cloth to the scrape, smiled at him, and nodded in a way that said, "It's okay. Life goes on." The man felt an unfamiliar pang, an intrusion of conscience. Here was no bureaucracy, no contractual obligation, no paycheck compelling her action. She had helped simply because it was right. And for the first time, he noticed the music in the chaos. The laughter of the boy as his mother approached, the faint hum of tricycle engines, the smell of cooking adobo wafting from a nearby home. That evening, he returned to his hotel room, soaked from a sudden rainstorm. Water ran down his designer shoes, plastered his hair to his forehead, and left a dark mark on his jacket. He stared at himself in the mirror, feeling the absurdity of it all. For years, he had measured wealth in numbers, efficiency, and control. But here, in a city that seemed messy and loud, a single act of kindness had already unsettled the foundation of his understanding, and he realized, quietly and painfully, that maybe he had been poor all along. The next day began with the same heat and chaos, yet something inside him had shifted, a subtle openness, a fragile curiosity. He wandered into a small provincial town outside Manila, following a vague suggestion from a taxi driver who spoke with a laugh that made everything seem lighter. The streets were narrower here, lined with wooden houses perched on stilts, smoke curling lazily from cooking fires. Children ran barefoot, splashing in puddles left by the morning drizzle, their laughter echoing off the tin roofs. The scent of wet earth mixed with fried garlic and roasting pork, creating an aroma that seemed almost sacred. He entered a modest eatery, the kind where menus were handwritten on chalkboards and chairs creaked under weight. A young woman with hair tied loosely behind her head approached, her hands damp from washing dishes. She greeted him with a smile, warm and unpretentious, and guided him to a table. He ordered something simple, rice, adobo, and a small cup of coffee, but when it arrived, it came with a free portion of fresh mango, sliced and glistening. "I made this for you," she said, shrugging as if it were nothing. He hesitated, pride prickling. He was not used to receiving without giving, to kindness without transaction. And yet, as he tasted the tender adobo, infused with vinegar and soy, and the mango melted sweet on his tongue, a strange, heavy relief began to seep into his chest. It was nourishment beyond hunger. He felt seen, cared for, human in a way his meetings and contracts had never allowed. The rain began again, tapping softly on the corrugated roof. Outside, children danced through puddles, and he caught the eye of an elderly man carrying a bamboo basket. The man nodded at him, wordlessly sharing the quiet joy of simply existing in this moment. Later, as the storm softened into a drizzle, he ventured down a narrow path toward a small riverside community. Laundry hung on lines, flapping like colorful flags. A dog barked in the distance. Smoke from cooking fires wove into the mist. A local boy offered to show him a shortcut, guiding him carefully over uneven planks and mudslick stones. The foreigner, used to maps and GPS, felt a flutter of humility with every step. They reached a small wooden bridge where the boy paused. His eyes sparkled. "Be careful," he said, and the businessman realized he had been tense the entire walk, clinging to control like a lifeline. For the first time, someone his own age, or younger, had treated him with trust, without asking for anything in return. He laughed, a little awkwardly, and the boy grinned, triumphant. That evening, he found himself invited to a neighbor's home for dinner. The family had little by material standards, yet they shared everything: rice, fish, vegetables freshly picked from their garden. They asked about his life, genuinely curious, not out of obligation but out of a deep, inherent respect for another person's story. He listened, he laughed, he felt included in a world he had never known. And in that simple act of shared meal and shared space, something in him shattered. The walls of arrogance, the rigid schedules, the endless pursuit of material superiority, they all fell away, leaving him vulnerable but alive. He realized that wealth was not counted in banknotes or accolades, but in trust, in community, in the quiet power of Malasakit and Bayanihan. As the night drew in, he stood on the wooden porch, rain still pattering softly around him. For the first time, he felt the pulse of the Philippines, not as a visitor, but as a witness to something sacred, something enduring. And he understood, without needing to speak it aloud, that his heart had begun to transform. By the final morning of his stay, the man awoke to the soft chorus of roosters and the distant hum of a tricycle. He no longer checked his phone first. He listened instead, savoring the rhythm of a life lived at its own pace. The rain from the previous night had left the streets glossy, reflecting the sun's tender light, and the scent of wet soil mingled with sweet banana leaves in the air. He stepped outside and found children playing, a neighbor offering a friendly nod, a stray dog padding by his side as if to say, "You belong here too." He walked slowly through the village, observing gestures he had once overlooked. A mother handing her child a warm cup of rice porridge, elders chatting on a worn bench, neighbors helping one another carry firewood. He realized that these were not small acts. They were lifelines, expressions of utengene lube and pakikisama woven into daily existence. And in their simplicity, he found a richness that no luxury suite, no private car, no foreign accolade could ever provide. As he prepared to leave, the young woman from the eatery approached, carrying a small basket of mangoes. "For your journey," she said, smiling. He accepted it, and in that moment, he felt a deep, unspoken gratitude, not just for the fruit, but for the people who had shown him how to be human again. The world he had left behind, with all its rules and contracts, suddenly felt hollow compared to this unassuming paradise of connection and care. He boarded the plane, suitcase in hand, but his heart felt light, transformed. The Philippines had not been a destination. It had been a mirror, reflecting his own pride, arrogance, and loneliness, and showing him the path to humility, warmth, and belonging. He realized that true wealth was not measured in numbers, but in the generosity of spirit, in the courage to care for others without expectation, and in the quiet miracle of Malasakit. As the plane rose into the clouds, he pressed his forehead against the window, watching the patchwork of villages and fields below. He whispered to himself, a truth he had only just discovered. The world could teach him more than his bank account ever would, and that sometimes the richest lives are lived in the simplest of homes. He came seeking control, efficiency, and status. He left with something far greater, a heart softened, a spirit awakened, and a new understanding of what it means to be truly rich. In the Philippines, he discovered that kindness, community, and the courage to care without expectation are treasures no money can buy. Have you ever experienced a moment of unexpected kindness that changed the way you see the world? Share your story below. And remember, sometimes the simplest gestures reveal the deepest truths about humanity.